Get ready to enter a brave new world with your host, Vasant Dar.
Brave New World is supported by the Center for Data Science, or CDS, at NYU. If your organization is interested in engaging with CDS through student projects, please email cdsindustry@nyu.edu. Hello, and welcome to Brave New World. For more color on the podcast and additional commentary, please subscribe to my newsletter at vasantdar.substack.com. My guest today is Maneka Gandhi. Maneka is the longest-standing member of the Indian Parliament and has been cabinet minister several times under different administrations, including Minister for the Environment and Minister for Women and Children. Many of India's existing environmental laws were made by her when she was the Minister for the Environment at the age of 32. She's also known for winning a landmark case in 1978 referred to as Maneka Gandhi versus the Union of India. Her passport was impounded, which she argued went against Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, which deals with personal liberty. Above all, she's a grassroots animal rights activist and has devoted her life to animal rights and welfare. She's created one of the largest animal rights organizations globally called People for Animals. If I were to summarize her core message, it is that animal cruelty and our mindless consumption of meat that is largely driven by the meat industry is destroying our planet and our soul. I did a lot of background reading for this conversation, and it's hard to ignore the evidence of the impact that industrial animal farming is having on the environment and on our physical and mental health. Maneka's message is that if you care about the planet, be Gandhian, namely, be the change you want to see by rejecting animal farming and cruelty. Maneka, welcome to Brave New World. I am delighted to have you on the show.
Thank you. We've now known each other for 53 years.
Indeed.
So it's rather fun.
Indeed. It's been a long time. And it's great to do this face-to-face. You know, I've recorded over 40 episodes, but only 3 face-to-face.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought you did all of them face-to-face.
No, we've become so virtual thanks to COVID that, people just, prefer Zoom. And of course, I'm talking to people all over the world, so it's all virtual. But it's nice not to have to worry about technology failures, which do happen occasionally. And besides, someone's told me I have a face for radio, so I think it all works well anyway. So
this is only the second proper interview I'm giving in my life, so I hope I survive it.
Cool. Well, I'm honored. So, this is a session primarily about animals and animal welfare, but let's start with politics because, you've been
Because,
exactly. You've been a very resilient politician. You're the longest serving member of parliament in India with 30 years in parliament, if I have my facts right, and 8 elections won, which is curious because India usually votes on caste and party lines, and you won 4 of these 8 seats as an independent. So what explains the resilience and what do you represent?
Yes, India does vote mainly on caste. And sometimes when there's a wave, they vote for a major leader. But in my case, people have been very good to me. I play the game exactly on my rules. I don't fit into any caste structure. I barely fit into any party structure. I am on campaign mode all the time. And what does that mean for me? And why am I in politics? A, because I believe that God gave me a lot. And I'm really, really, even at this age, angry about inequity, about unfairness. It bothers me that people don't have access to simple justice. So I've spent most of my life trying to make up to them. So I become an interface, which is immediate. I pick up every call. I do their work immediately the same day. I interact at every level with police and administration all the time. What do I stand for? I stand for animals, environment. And I never lose sight of those goals. I have a strong passion, a strong sense of urgency, and a very focused attitude about wanting to change the world, either for that one person or that one animal or that one institution. I'm not a huge thinker, even though we do big things. For me, it starts small. So if I can save that ant while having a bath, I'm fine.
Well, I think you're being modest, but let's talk a little bit about your journey. You've been at this for a long time, and I don't mean politics, which is also something you've been at for a long time.
I actually haven't been at politics at all.
You've been in politics for a long time, even
politics,
though you're not
more
a
as
politician.
A tool.
Yeah. But you've been into animal rights and animal welfare for a long time. Was there a aha moment, or was it sort of a gradual realization?
No, I think that I was born like that without even knowing that I was born like that. So I can't say that I was a great animal rights person as a child, but I was very aware of the entire existence of the animal kingdom. And I got my first dog bite when I was 6, trying to feed a dog on the street without particularly caring for it. It's just because who I was. What would be the aha moment? I got married when I was very young. And I'd barely been married 2 months. When my husband said to me, he said, you talk about animals all the time, and then at night you eat them. So either you keep quiet from now, because I'm not prepared to take this kind of duplicity, or you stop eating meat. And then that night, I was so taken aback when I spilled soup, and so I've got a big mark here on myself, and stopped from that night. But I would say that would be the turning point when I realized that I either had to make a total commitment, and it had to be an intelligent commitment. It can't be just, mooing and croning and groaning over dog deaths or something. It had to be something that encompassed my commitment to all life. And that's when I changed.
In preparation for our conversation, I was reading Peter Singer's Animal Liberation, and I read it on my way to Kashmir, which is where I'm just returning from. And, I've been a non-vegetarian all my life. I guess that's a nice way of saying carnivore. And, Kashmiri cuisine is full of these, meat delicacies. But it was, for me, the aha moment, and we've talked about meat eating and sort of animal cruelty, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But reading that book, I just could not ignore the facts any longer, and I wrote this newsletter, which a few weeks ago, where I just said, it's hard to ignore. It's just hard to turn a blind eye to what's going on. So to me, that's
actually the thing is, it's quite simple. The law of nature, or Shrishti as we call her, the universe. How does it respond? If you're mean, it's mean right back. It makes absolutely no difference who you are and how many good things that you have done. If you're mean, it will kick back. So if you eat meat and because of you an animal has died, uski jo aah lagti hai, the sound of its suffering carries right to the grid, the electronic grid that the universe is. And on that grid, you get punished right there. So that is why the world suffers so much.
So is this like an Indian way of thinking, where there's some sort of a notion of sort of an inner conscience or an atma, which, when it comes to animals and eating meat, I think that different people sort of draw the line differently with respect to that inner conscience. I think most people just sort of grow up with it. It's normal.
The human has a wonderful way to explain anything vicious to themselves. The Americans attack Iraq on a false, arms thing, and they can explain it to themselves, saying they're doing it for their country. Or Vietnam. What does Vietnam have to do with America? We are constantly at war with Pakistan or some other place. We try to hold our peace. Why would Pakistan want to war with us? So we justify everything, and what we justify the most is cruelty. But there is no justification for it. I was at a peace conference for Nobel Prize winners and heads of state and stuff in Puerto Rico. And each person who took the mic, and it was about how to bring about peace in the world. And then they talked about, let's exchange this dictatorship with democracy. Let's exchange democracy with with oligarchy or whatever. And when it was my turn, I said, none of this, it works. We've tried every system. We've tried monarchies and oligarchies, and we've tried plutocracies and democracies and just about everything. And yet we're at war all the time. Every country is at war within itself and against each other. And why is that? Perhaps it's because we cause so much suffering to other beings that there is no way that this thing that lives inside us, the Atma, the spirit, could ever live at peace. And there is no way that the universe will not retaliate. So we cause as much suffering to ourselves as we cause to the outer world. Somebody who eats meat the whole day and then goes to sleep and says before that, oh God, please forgive me and make my life wonderful. Why should the universe give you something? We have made this planet a hell for us. Because we've made it a hell for everything else. No, we have so many examples. So if we were to turn vegetarian, the world would stop suffering. It's as simple as that. Not vegetarian. If we were to turn vegan.
Yeah.
Because vegetarian now is meaningless. If you don't eat meat and you still drink milk, it comes from the same animal. And milk is a cow on its way to slaughter. And so is an egg.
Indeed. And I want to come back to this in a little more detail later. But let's start with sort of, we've already touched on cruelty. What are the concerns around sort of the industrialization of the production of meat, right? Because that's sort of really...
That's the worst.
It's brought sort of meat to the masses, right? But, in my newsletter, I talk about the fact that industry maximizes conversion ratio, which is price to input costs. And that seems to be directly proportional to cruelty, right? The more you try to sort of maximize that and cut costs and things like that. And Peter's book sort of gets into this in sort of pretty graphic detail, that, you're sort of inherently going to go for the cheapest and all of that. And that leads to, sort of animal farming. Now, so are the concerns, and I sort of broke them down into sort of, are they moral? Are they environmental? Are they economic, health? What are how would you sort of classify the concerns you have around animal welfare?
They're everything. It's not moral, environmental. They're just destroying the planet. When we have an industrialization of eggs, milk, and meat, which encompasses everything, the profits are made, and the cheapest form of meat or whatever this food is called is only the cheapest for that company. It's the most expensive for the rest of the planet. Anybody who eats meat has taken a huge chunk out of global warming, out of polluting the sea, out of suffering for other people, out of destroying the land, out of destroying the Amazon forest. And I can't think of anything they haven't done. So what is the point of a priest sitting in a church or a mandir? In our mandirs, of course, they are vegetarian. But what's the point of a priest sitting in a church, eating himself full of meat, and then coming out and talking about goodness and charity, when it doesn't even apply? An industrial house like Cargill, for instance, can make profits for itself, but its people, its wives, the children, where they live, they really cannot escape the fact that they have destroyed the whole world. When India is the largest meat exporter in the world, our cattle exporter. But for what reason? For what reason? Our forests, do you know how many forests?
Wait a minute. I'm really kind of shocked to hear that we would be the largest cattle exporter.
We are.
And you're not talking about buffalo, you're talking about
I'm talking about both. I'm talking about buffalo in as a cover-up, but it encompasses all, including cows.
Okay, carry on. I was sorry to interrupt. But
No.
Yeah.
The point is, we are the largest exporters. We feed the whole of the Middle East. We feed all the little islands. We feed Malaysia, Jordan, whatever we can feed. The point is, what has it done to us? Let's give you an example of how much money we earn through it. How much money do we earn from meat export? The government. Zero. We have no taxes on meat. We have no GST on meat. The government earns zilch, zero. But what do we pay for it? Every single cow or buffalo grazes in in forests, and they're bottom grazers. They pull out everything. So we have no forests. No country can survive if it doesn't have 24 to 25% forests. Haryana has 1%. Punjab has 1%. Delhi has 0.2% or something. And what we do is we fake the statistics. We average out. So the Northeast has, say, 28%, and we average it with 1% and say, oh, we're fine. We've got 18% or 90%. In actual fact, we have no forests. So when we take the satellite pictures for Parliament to show everybody that we have forests, we take them when the sugarcane is at its height, so that we show the forests. But that's because we don't have that. So, A, we earn no money. 2, we're losing our forests. 3, we've lost almost all our wild animals. I mean, you're down to 1,500 tigers. What is 1,500 in a country of 1.3 billion people? And
so remind me why we're doing this. Why does India do this? What's the net benefit?
We have no idea. There is absolutely no logic. It's a good question. Why do we do it? No idea. Because one cow or one buffalo, in order to turn them into usable meat, takes something like over 20,000 liters of water. Do we have that water? We have people still queuing up for 1 mug a day. We have problems with water in every village. So why are we doing this? We have Hindu-Muslim relations going completely foully wrong, only based on the cow-buffalo issue. 2 ways. 1, the Hindus say they don't kill cows, but they sell them to the Muslims who do kill the cows, and yet they attack them. So both of them are equally involved. No Muslim breeds cows. Secondly, and even more important, they let the cows out as soon as they become sterile. And those cows have nowhere to eat, so they go into the fields. And so people who have small holdings, like 1 acre or half an acre, suddenly find their crop eaten by the cows who don't know where to go. And then somebody will throw acid on them. And then there'll be a riot. So you have created problems where none should exist. Were we to stop meat export, 70% of our meat would disappear. 70% of our meat-growing animals. But, for instance, the whole of Rajasthan continues to be desertified, and it's moving out more and more because they grow goats. The goats have eaten up the entire Aravalli Hills. There's not a speck of grass on them. So we have now ordered sheep into Uttarakhand. We've brought the sheep from Australia. What's going to happen? In a couple of years, you'll have massive landslides because the sheep will have eaten up all the cover. We brought sheep into Kashmir. So I don't know what on earth we are doing growing meat when this country is earning nothing at all. They're not taxed at all. And if you look at our slaughterhouses, the really big ones, Al-Kabir, for instance, was the first huge big slaughterhouse. It's near Hyderabad. They haven't paid water and electricity bills for 22 years. Al-Kabir, India, exports its meat to Al-Kabir, Dubai. And Al-Kabir, Dubai writes a letter on every consignment which goes through 4 Boeings a week, saying the meat that you sent us was bad, so we had to throw it away. And it's been going on for 22 years. So as a result, they have never made a rupee. Where did they get those Boeings from? We don't know. We have got slaughterhouses in Delhi. All these private slaughterhouses are owned basically by foreigners. They're not even owned by Indians. People who come from Dubai, people who come from the Middle East, and they use our land, our forests, our water, our everything, and create hatred everywhere. And this huge underground network, we have very strong laws, none of which are followed. So every day we stand on the road and we stop trucks that are going illegally. And then there's a fight with the police because most of the police are on the payroll. I'm just saying it's created so much social tension. Just meat alone. It's created a problem between Hindus and Muslims, which perhaps we may never be able to solve until we stop this meat export. It has given nobody jobs. It's made nobody rich. We did a film on the slaughterhouse that supplied Delhi, and we found that most of these men who were butchers, they brought their children in at 2 years and 3 years, and they were also cutting, because they said that if they grow more than that, they don't want to do it. So they inured them at that age. But most of the time, they were defecating and urinating on the meat itself.
This sort of relates to what I said earlier, this notion of the Atma, right? You bring a 2-year-old, well, then that's normal.
That's normal, yeah.
It's normal. And we just grow up with
violence.
This stuff being, this is normal, right? I mean, I didn't really think about eating meat because I just sort of grew up with it. To me, it was just normal. And in this day and age, it sort of comes nicely packaged. So,
and now they don't say meat anymore. They say protein.
Protein, yeah. No, in fact, it's not uncommon to have...
there was a study done where an advertising agency in the 70s realized that beef was heading for a fall sooner or later, when people said. So it divided meat technically in advertising terms into white meat and red meat. And then it made people feel good about white meat.
Right.
So people went for another 30 years into white meat.
Right.
Whereas if you do a comparison, white meat or chicken, fish have exactly the same calories, more oil, more cholesterol than red meat. But it became like wine and beer.
Right.
Truck drivers smoke and eat red meat, and the educated classes drink wine and eat white meat. So literally, it was an advertising gimmick. Anyway, to come back to social tensions, there was a study done, I forget by whom, on which is the most awful place. I mean, they used a proper scientific term, but which is the most awful place to live in America. And so they divided it, of course, naturally, first by color. Is it in black areas or white areas? Then it became rich and poor. Then it became...
blue or red.
Yeah, exactly. Blue or red is probably where they start.
Right.
And they couldn't find any linkages from anywhere. Could it be heart of the city? Could it be suburbs?
Mm-hmm.
Could it be where there was more joblessness? They tried every which way. Finally, they got it. And that was, it is the 1 kilometer or 2 kilometer radius around a slaughterhouse. That is the worst place to live in America. And why? Because people who are sitting inside and killing animals the whole day come out and they're easy with robbing, killing, heinous crimes, wife beating, child beating, drinking. So they found that this was truly the absolute hell on earth. It changes people totally.
Yeah, no, I think anyone who visits one of those slaughterhouses, I know someone who visited...
It's not just slaughterhouses. If it was just, if they were kept themselves apart and then just tried to help them, like Temple Grandin showed a way to have slaughterhouses, but to make them humane.
Mm-hmm.
But even that, it's not possible. If you look at a slaughterhouse, the films on slaughterhouse, they kick chickens, they use them as footballs. They stab them repeatedly just for fun. They take races, they take bets on how far a chicken without one leg can walk as compared to a chicken with 2 legs. I mean, those people are bored. They're completely immune to death and to suffering. So now they make games out of it. And those games are so vicious, so vicious. You just have to wonder, are we human or what?
This reminds me of something from Peter's book where he talks about experimentation on monkeys.
For no reason.
That they basically hit a monkey really hard over the head and see what happens, like what the hemorrhaging effects are and stuff like that. And they noticed that some people, actually some of the experimenters were...
like it.
Yeah, or viewed it as a game. Which is really...
But look at the experiments that we have designed. Look at the Dre's test. What is the Dre's test? You put a rabbit in a stock and you open its eyes and keep them open with pins. And then you pour chemicals into the eyes and until the rabbit goes blind. For no reason. And these rabbits are in so much pain that over 70% of them shake their heads so strongly that their necks break.
Wow.
For no reason. We've tried to have it banned so many times. He keeps saying, no, it's an important test. It has no value. Or you have the lipstick test. The lipstick test on monkeys. You give a monkey a huge amount of lipsticks to eat. And you make a thing at what stage it dies. But is any woman likely to have 75 lipsticks? Is she going to commit suicide with 75 lipsticks at a time?
Yeah.
So what is the point of this? So much of what we do is pointless. For instance, you and I, when we were growing up, we had to dissect animals in biology. So most people didn't take biology because they didn't want to dissect the rat. But many boys who took it, who were not at all scientifically oriented, took it just to kill because it was important to them, and to show the girls that they were men. So how do you do that? You slice up rats or you slice up dogs. When I became minister for the first time at the age of 32, I banned this immediately. So now we have no dissection in schools, and you're producing probably better doctors. And then I went on to ban it in colleges. I went to ban it in medical school, in just about as many disciplines as I could.
This whole notion of experimentation on animals is always justified on the grounds that it helps humans.
It's never ever helped a human.
In some way. Peter frames it well. He says, he calls it speciesism, right?
Yes.
It's like one species, just not, and I think his views are there's no consideration, for another species, and that
also medical knowledge doesn't translate from species to species.
Right.
Normally you kill an animal because a dog is a dog is a dog. And then you experiment him because a dog is a boy. Does that make sense?
So where do you draw the line on something like this, right?
No, just stop it.
Is it okay to experiment on cockroaches?
Why would it? Let me tell you my cockroach story. When I stopped it all over India, Kerala continued and transferred to cockroaches. Now, I wrote to them.
Continued what?
Dissection.
Okay.
In schools.
Mm-hmm.
When I stopped it all over India, it continued in Kerala. And I wrote to them and said, why are you dissecting cockroaches? A cockroach has a completely different blood system. It has a completely different body. Nobody is going to grow up to become a cockroach doctor, not even a vet. And because of this, people are growing cockroaches now to sell to the schools. And out of the cockroaches they're growing, at least 70% are going to run away. Because a cockroach is a very resourceful creature.
I know, they'll survive anything. Yeah.
Most everything. And so you're just going to have more cockroaches in there. Do you need this? And the answer I got from the health secretary there was that we need to kill something. That was actually in black and white. The children need to kill something. And I wrote back
just
and
as an end in itself?
Yeah, as an end in itself. And then I stopped it. It took me more time. But I couldn't believe that a human being would put down on paper that the children of this state need to kill something.
Many scientists use mice for experimentation, like a lot of neuroscientists, they see what mazes they go down, test memory and stuff. Is that okay?
No, even that's not okay. What is it okay for? What are you learning? What are you learning? A mouse is not only sentient, but it's one of the cleverest little creatures. And, mice giggle when you tickle them. And mice are storytellers. You'll have a mouse that's outgoing and he holds his audience in thrall while he tells them a joke. You have morose mice. You have mothers who like their children. I just don't see how you cannot see killing any other animal is killing yourself. They're exactly like you. If you just get to know, for instance, chickens. Yeah. Chickens cheat on their wives. Chickens tell a lot of lies. A chicken will, when he wants to woo a female chicken, the male, he will tell her, look, I found food. And then she'll come and she'll find there's no food. And then when he does it the second time, she'll still fall for it. The third time, she'll tell all her girlfriends, ye phekta hai. And nobody will then marry him or have sex with him. And when they get married, they actually have a family. They have children. And then he goes and gets a girlfriend. And the first wife quarrels hugely. But then he's so mean to her when they have to cross the road, for instance. Why does the chicken cross the road? Now you know. He first sends the wife.
He's looking for a girlfriend.
He's looking for his first wife to be run over.
Follow me.
So she goes over the road first, and then he follows with his girlfriend. So how can you possibly eat something that, or a being that is exactly like you? They have, a language, a proper language. Chickens and pigs have grammatical sentences.
Yeah, no, I had no idea about this extensive social structure of mice and chickens. And when you talk about suffering, I think it reminds me of a quote by Philip Wallen, where he says, we all suffer the same.
We all suffer the same.
We suffer equally, regardless
I think we suffer equally. But the point is, how do you eat yourself day after day after day? That is what we need to solve.
Yeah. No, and in fact,
and do we not notice all the diseases that come with cannibalism?
So that it's great that you bring that up, because I got several reactions to my newsletter about animal farming and protein, and some people said, "Hey, great, good for you for turning vegetarian, but be careful," because I think there's sort of a general belief that a meat-based diet is better than a vegetarian diet because of the protein and some essential amino acids, right? So people justify that based on that it's a better diet.
So the thing is that for the last 100 odd years, who has had more money to pay advertising agencies? The meat industry. Who does the vegetarian industry pay? Nobody at all. So if you actually break down how these mythologies have started, they've been the result of concerted campaigns. You are selling a product, so you say it has more protein, it has more calcium. Let me give you one example. Milk is supposed to give you more calcium. But you have studies done all over the world, including in Yale, which is the most important study, saying that the more milk you drink, the less calcium you have. And why is that? Because every time you drink milk, it turns into acid in your stomach. After all, it's broken down immediately by the acids in your stomach. And your body goes into shock because it becomes pH acidic. Now, it has to be pH neutral. So immediately, the body takes the calcium out of the bones and throws them into the stomach so that it neutralizes the acid created by the milk. So you actually lose calcium every time you drink milk. This is apart from the fact that nobody except a white, and that too only 40% of whites, can digest milk. We simply don't have lactase. So how do you digest lactose? The third thing, let's look at even one small thing. You have an ulcer, and the doctor will tell you what? Drink cold milk. So you drink masses of cold milk and then die of a huge big hole in the stomach. And why? Because the operative part of cold milk is cold. So when you drink something cold, it numbs the pain of the hole in the stomach, the ulcer. But after 2 minutes, the milk turns into acid, and then it gets to work on the hole, making it bigger and bigger and bigger. So in India, for instance, I don't know about the rest of the world, but in India, medical doctors do not study nutrition at all. Now, one would think that this would be the stupidest thing in the world, because your entire body is a machine. Suppose I were to feed a car lollipops or sugar. At some point, that machine would break down, and fairly easily. So why would we not study what this machine needs for energy? But we don't, because if we don't teach doctors nutrition, what do they know how to put into a body? Your illnesses are created by food, and illnesses are cured by food. Medicine just buys you time. So if you don't study nutrition, what do you do? So a doctor, when you go to him and he says, and you say, I'm anemic, and then he says, eat 3 kilos of beef every day. He hasn't got that information from a medical point of view. He's got it from the same place that you have got your information, which is from your mother, your ayah, your grandmother, the next door neighbor, and somebody down the road. So we have no knowledge at all of GIGO. Garbage in, garbage out. So we need, if we were to actually start to reform the world, we would have to start with introducing nutrition into schools and colleges, and proper nutrition. Not rubbish nutrition, which is paid for, as in America, by companies. When they give children milk, during that midday meal that children have in schools, I remember one state wanted to give them vegetarian, and immediately the companies then made cheese vegetarian, made eggs vegetarian. So the meat industry, I remember when Oprah Winfrey talked about how she would never eat a hamburger again after she found out how it was made. And they sued her for $100 million or some extraordinary amount for nothing. When we have gone against Amul here and said that the milk is poisonous, we don't need it, etc., they have sued us. So the industry is very big. It has nothing to do with medical facts. If we could just get the doctors on our side to tell the truth, no industry would be able to stand. You do not get more protein. You get
is that the critical success factor, or one of them?
One of the critical success factors is to get the doctors to learn nutrition, and unbiased nutrition, not paid for nutrition, nutritional so-called facts. So meat does not give you more protein than lentils. Milk does not give you calcium. It may have calcium in it, but you have no access to it. An egg gives you more cholesterol than anything else. Let's give you one simple thing. It may not pertain to this subject, but you can, since I'm already talking. An egg is divided into white and yellow. The yellow, in actual fact, has not existed for the last 40 years. There is no yellow in the egg because the egg industry cannot produce yellow unless the chicken eats a combination of grass in the sun. That turns the machine into producing the yellow in an egg. But because the yellow doesn't exist and the industry has put sunshine pictures and talked about the yellow in the egg, now they're caught. So what to do? So they buy a chemical called cantharidin and they inject it into the chicken as a chemical to dye the white, which is to turn it yellow. And if you look, the Chinese sell it. It's a Chinese product. And they give you a color card, like you paint your walls. And you can opt for dull yellow, bright yellow, little yellow, whitish yellow. So you actually grade your yellows and take whichever cantharidin you want. It's on the net. You can buy it and inject your chickens if you like. But it doesn't exist. So the thing that you are eating is a chemical product called an egg. It's basically a mixture of period blood, which is why when you cut an egg open and you leave it for 10 minutes, it smells just like the menstrual blood of a woman. And a woman's menstrual blood does not smell like her blood. It smells like menstrual blood. But so does an egg because it is menstrual blood. So why would you want to eat menstrual blood? Yucky.
Yucky indeed. So what are the other critical success factors? What do we need to do?
There are things that people can do with knowledge, okay? That takes an inordinately long time. I can't, because you'll come across arguments from each individual person. You can't possibly do that. So I would say there are 2 or 3 critical factors. One, there are certain things that people do and certain things that governments should do. Government now has to step in. That means if we're going to educate somebody, we educate the doctors on one side, but we also educate governments. And we teach them about what earns money for you. We're going to come to this question sooner or later on compassion and good economics. But the government needs to make laws. The government needs to make laws like there will be no meat export for any country. You want to eat meat, grow it yourself.
So just hold off on that. So I want to touch on this compassion and economics because
I'm going to
earlier
come
I
back
was
to
talking
that.
about, okay, yeah.
The third thing we need to do now is to stop pretending. For me, I've spent 100 million years on this in this koshish, but I now realize I can't turn the world vegetarian. But what I can do is to aim at suffering. I can remove suffering while giving you what you want. So the answer to that is clean meat. Clean milk, clean meat. These are the three things that you need to do. Get governments to step in about export, get clean meat organized, and teach the doctors. These are three things I believe would make a difference.
And what do you mean by clean meat?
Clean meat is the multiplication of meat by multiplying just the actual cells of meat.
So artificial meat would be
No,
clean
it's
meat?
not artificial meat. It's real meat.
Uh-huh.
It just doesn't use an animal. So you take cells and you put them into a petri dish. And they will grow in a meat-based sauce.
But I thought that's what artificial meat was.
No.
What's the...
There's a difference now. Artificial meat is what we call mock meat.
Oh, I see. So some made out of soy.
It's made out of soy,
Right.
seaweed,
Uh-huh.
Other things,
Right.
and it imitates the taste of meat.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is real meat, which I would advocate hugely.
Right.
That we pass this milestone or block, I would call it a block, not a milestone, of mock meat. Mock meat is helping nobody. It's making a few people get rich, the same way as Kargil gets rich with meat. So mock meat is giving you meat without, but it's making more vegetarians eat meat than it is making meat eaters turn vegetarian.
Right.
No meat eater treats mock meat as anything other than an amusement. What we need to do is get to the third disruption. The first disruption that changed this world was electricity. The second disruption was IT. And the third disruption now will be clean meat. If you have meat which you can make through just multiplying cells, you will be able to give meat eaters exactly what they want. After all, the taste of meat has nothing to do with the flesh. It has to do with the curries and the spices that you put on it. Mm-hmm. So you take the flesh, you create the flesh, and then you fill it up with the same spices and curries that you want, and give it to them. And if they want it rare, then you have a rare steak. Now we have reached this point where we can do it.
Well, some people like the blood too. They want their steak rare.
You can get blood also.
Yeah.
If you can get meat, you can get blood.
Sure, yeah.
In fact, mock meat is producing mock blood, which tastes exactly like real blood. Yucky again. But, imagine you don't even like the taste of your own blood. If you were to lick your wound,
Yeah.
You wouldn't even like that taste. So why bother to lick somebody else's blood?
You're making this sound really...
So clean meat, the amazing part about it is that all the people, all the big guys, that Stephen Jobs, the Alibaba guy, all the heroes of the second disruption have all invested in clean meat. And they have created this, the businesses, the startups. It started with PETA offering $1 million to anybody who could make a hamburger of real meat without using animals.
I didn't realize it was PETA's inducement.
Yes.
Wow.
And so people all over the country, all over the world, were so happy, were so excited. Mm-hmm. And the Dutch government took it even more seriously than anybody else. So they got their scientists working from the government side. And ultimately, they created a $200,000 hamburger, which was the first piece of meat ever created by multiplying cells. Mm-hmm. Now, because that was done, It was like the first plane by the Wright brothers. And many companies came up. And they were immediately invested in by the second disruptors. If you were to be able to produce flesh, which did not use an animal, what does it mean? It means, millions and millions and millions of acres would be freed up. Your global warming would stop because methane would no longer go into the atmosphere. Your water...
So methane is what, the cow farts, animal farts, all that stuff?
The chicken.
Yeah.
Any animal grown for meat.
Right.
And it's much more lethal than carbon dioxide. Much, much more. 24 times more. But the good thing about methane is that if you stop producing methane, it will disappear in 4 years. And you will have your skies back, your weather back stable, everything back. So if we were to remove animal industries, then you would get your forests back. I mean, the Amazon is being cut for what? So much magic in that amazing forest. It keeps us all going. It actually sustains the whole world. And it's being cut 1 football field per minute. For what reason? For animal farming. So every time you eat meat, you eat the Amazon. And you eat all the amazing butterflies and frogs. So if you had clean meat, you would have, no shipping. What would it reduce? Petrol costs. Here you kill a cow one place and then you ship it millions of miles away for somebody else to eat. Whereas here, if you had clean meat, you could make it in every village. You just have a silo. Small silos that create meat, and then you take the meat and you turn it into whatever you want. You would have a completely new meat industries growing up, which were clean. You would not get any diseases. Do you know, for instance, 33% of all our cattle have cancer. So every time you eat an Indian buffalo or cow, you are eating a cancerous being. Now, this may not make much difference to you because we have a world in which people deliberately pay 20 times more to eat a cancerous liver. What is pate foie gras? It's simply feeding a goose deliberately with an iron rod down to its stomach. Enormous amounts of wheat per minute till its liver, which is a tiny little thing, grows to this big, really huge, and becomes yellow and cancerous. And then you cut it open with a knife, you take out the liver, and you piso it, and you pull off the outer yellow, and then you sell it raw. But the point is they're eating cancerous meat all the time. Our cows and buffaloes have got brucellosis in the milk, which gives tuberculosis to human beings. I'll come back to that story later. But there is no disease they don't have. Foot and mouth disease. Sometimes you notice Indians and other people, I don't know about other people, Indians get, for no reason, they'll get ulcers in their mouth, or sometimes ulcers on their face, or something on their hands. That's foot and mouth disease, which you are getting from a foot and mouth animal. The disease is hugely prevalent in India. So what do we not have? Our horses have got glanders, and yet people are eating horse meat. Glanders is such a frightening disease that it was the only bacteria or virus ever used on the First World War. They used to spray it on the enemy. Every country shot its animals dead when they found out about glanders. The only country now left with glanders is India. And when I wrote to the government saying we have a Glanders Institute for the last 70 years or something in Haryana, why don't you check the horses? And they did, on my saying so, in Kashmir, and found out that a large proportion of them had glanders. Now, glanders is like this. It's zoonotic, which means humans get it. And they get it in a flash. You have to sit on a horse. All the horses that go to Vaishno Devi, a certain percentage of them have glanders. Horses either die immediately of glanders, just fall down dead, or they live for about a year and their veins come sticking out. So if you see a horse with veins, that's not because he's malnourished. It's because he's got glanders. And then you sit on him and you're likely to get it. You have to breathe the same air as him to get it. And then you go back after visiting the goddess and then you get it 6 weeks later and die because there is no diagnosis of glanders. And then you say, oh, I'm so lucky that I got to see the goddess before I died, not knowing that the goddess gave it to you specially. So every time we said, look, replace the horses with golf carts, they keep saying, no, it belongs to poor people. It belongs to poor people. I said, give the poor people golf carts. So that hasn't yet been happened, but we're at it. I have a case in court. We won the first round, and the government of Kashmir has appealed. They've lost the second round, and they've been fined for not doing it. But they're still going ahead.
So come back to sort of economics and compassion. Because we talked about economics and cruelty. So
this is one of the cases. Let's give you another case about how compassion is good economics, or how the lack of compassion is bad economics. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. We have no vultures left in India. Now, vultures were very, very important to our well-being. They're horrible looking birds. But then, what the hell, I'm not going to marry one. But when they left, nobody cared. But what did their going do? And how did they go? How did they suddenly become extinct? We have cattle. We're a cattle-based country. As I said, 33% of the cattle in use have a yoke, which is based on their neck. We have designed yokes that the whole body can take the weight. Government has not moved at all to make this popular. So the farmers just put the huge wooden yoke on the neck. And the cattle, the bell, the bhais, they all get neck cancer. Once they have neck cancer, the symptoms are they're in great, great pain. Imagine if your neck was, you had cancer there. So the owner, instead of saying, okay, I won't use this animal anymore and I'll have him treated, can't have him treated because there's no veterinary services in this country at all. So where does he take that animal? Nowhere. So what he does is, let me take the last drop of blood before this animal drops dead. So he buys in the market a medicine called diclofenac. Diclofenac is a painkiller, a very, very strong painkiller, which causes other problems, acidity and other things. But he shoots up the cow, the buffalo, we have different names for the neutered ones, bell, etc. He shoots them up with an injection. Now, at some point, that animal falls down dead. And like all good owners, he leaves it where it's fallen down dead. He doesn't bother to bury it or cremate it or anything. It's gone, it's gone. When the vultures existed, they would come within 10 minutes and finish off, clean up the entire body so that there was nothing left except the bones, which over a period are clean. Mm-hmm. Now, the vultures ate the meat infested with diclofenac. So when they had eggs, the eggs became so soft because of the chemical reactions of this in their bodies that when they sat on their eggs, the eggs broke. Mm-hmm. So the entire generations were wiped out. Suddenly there were vultures and then there were no vultures. Mm-hmm. So we kept telling the government, why don't you start treatment of the animals and be compassionate to animals that have cancer, instead of allowing just diclofenac to take the place of proper veterinary treatment. But what the hell? So the cattle are still there with cancer. It's the vultures that went. Now, as soon as the vultures went, you have nothing to clean up the dead bodies in a village. So disease has actually increased by 2 to 6% because of the lack of vultures. And I'm talking about disease in humans. Because when the carcass is lying there, other, bottle flies sit on it, then they sit on the vegetables. Your worms in your body have increased because of lack of vultures, because the flies that sit on the dead body then sit on the vegetables, especially the cabbages, I'm told. And then, because that's a cheap food, you then take it, no matter how much you wash it, the worm will get into your body. And even if you're a vegetarian, you're likely to get tapeworms, roundworms, and other worms, which kill you. So where do you trace the roundworms in your body to? To the diclofenac in the cancerous animal, via the vulture.
Yeah, no, these are just such complex systems. It reminds me of the Yellowstone Park where they took away the wolves, and that just created a whole sort of chain
Everything
reaction.
fell down.
Everything just fell apart.
Yeah.
It just changed nature, and then they had to bring back the wolves.
That's right. So that would be one. But you take anything. For instance, I forget which country in I've written about it, but I forget which country, one of the upper or lower voltas or something, in Africa. They had hippopotamuses in their river. And those are completely serene beings. The word hippopotamus is river horse. And they live mainly in the river, and they go down, they paddle, they swim. So at some point, they decided to kill the hippopotamuses. So they killed them. They killed all of them. As soon as they killed them, the people who lived in that area for miles around started getting an absolutely fatal disease. And then their entire, funds that they get internationally were then pooled into just finding a cure for this disease or a reason for this disease, which was killing them. And what did they find? They found that when the hippopotamuses were there, they never used to let a particular kind of snail breed because they were constantly churning the water inside. But once they were gone, the snail settled down and poisoned the water. So there you are. Yeah. Just bad economics. And their entire international money went into that and is still going into that. Most people do not personalize global warming. They do not see it as affecting them personally as yet. But if they were to realize what happens, so it's not about bad monsoons and good monsoons. And it's not just affecting farmers. How does this affect me? I'll give you an example. The Indian Ocean is the ocean that is most affected by global warming. So what's happened is it's become polarized. So on the African side, it's much, much hotter. On the Australian side, it's much, much colder. When it's cold on the Australian side, there's no rain. So the forest fires have been incredible. So people have lost their homes. So much of Australia was burnt up. Nobody has related that to the coldness of the Indian Ocean. On this side, when it's become hot, the rains have increased so much in Africa that the locusts have gone up by something like 600% because they grow in the rain. Now, there's the 6 countries in Africa that host them have been eaten up. So they had nothing, they had no food. So they came to Iran, and then from Iran they came via Pakistan into India. And they hit Rajasthan and they hit Gujarat. And our government kept it secret because it's a disaster the like of which we've never seen. But in one day, they ate up 150,000 hectares of food. Now, when they eat them up, what is the response we have? We have nothing because we've made sparrows extinct. Sparrows could have worked again with the locusts, but we didn't. So, and nor did we bother to breed sparrows, nor did we bother to put them back. So what we have is a pesticide solution. So if you take a helicopter in the air and you throw pesticide on the locusts, that will go down, and whatever's left of the crop will be a pesticided crop, which you can't eat. However, because this amount of acreages have been eaten up by the locusts, food is much more expensive. So because of global warming, my tomato costs now 20 times what a normal tomato would have cost. My wheat costs more. My rice costs more. But people don't link it. My salary is not increasing, but the percentage that is going on food now is now almost 70% of my salary. A nimbu, a lemon, which used to come free when we were young, with dhania. If you remember coriander, nimbus, mirchis, used to be given free. Now a nimbu is 10 rupees a lemon. So we have not related our own suffering, our own nervousness with what we have created. Now, then you say, okay, global warming is carbon dioxide related, but it isn't. It is methane related. And methane comes from animals. So what is the animal industry doing? What is Cargill doing? What are the scientists doing? Instead of saying, okay, let's batten down, let's just get rid of the animals and save the planet instead. Instead, what they're doing is now a fresh round of experimentation, experimenting on cows to make them give less methane. One cow gives 600 liters a day. So now you fiddle with the intestines, you give them more rubbish to eat so that they have less methane coming out of their anuses. That there's no tech solution for this. From 600, it'll go to 500. But the number of cows is multiplied because your meat eating now has reached a level where it did not exist even 3 years ago. More people are becoming vegetarian. More people are becoming vegan. But the meat eaters have increased their meat eating. And countries like India, thanks to advertising, we have 170 cooking shows on all our TVs, all of which are meat-based. MasterChef has turned more people meat-eating than anyone else. So you now have to understand that there's choice now between what is on your plate and whether you're going to live till tomorrow. You may live till tomorrow, but what are your children going to have? We have had 2 years of our children sitting outside school. Only the rich children could use the computers. 90% of our children had no access to technology. So they remained at home. They did not learn anything. And now when they've gone back to school, studies by the Education Ministry have shown that they've completely forgotten math. They were learning the rudiments of English. Not one of them could speak English. So where did that start? Global warming. You're not relating your children's ignorance and the fact that where did COVID start? From Wuhan. And what did Wuhan do? It ate wild animals. So they created a virus that came from cannibalism and spread around the world. How many of these? We've got swine flu. We've got monkeypox. We've got bird flu. We've got, at the moment as I speak, there's an epidemic which is untreated and unrecognized by the government of not just foot and mouth, but of distemper and parvo amongst dogs. We don't know whether it's zoonotic. I mean, it's after millions of years that we found out that rabies was zoonotic.
It's amazing. You mentioned COVID, and there's just a reluctance to discuss its origins, right? It's just that...
No, it's not. It's a reluctance and a fear of China. It's a fear of China.
Yeah.
Because America and every country is dependent on Chinese cheap goods.
Right.
And Chinese buying your stuff. So China, India, Brazil, we are beyond being discussed or criticized. Because they'll be your biggest buyers and your biggest sellers. If you criticize us and say that your meat is filthy, we'll simply stop supplying it. Then what will you do? No, for years and years, we have never ever criticized Burma when it was being mean to Aung San Suu Kyi. When those generals, when she was in jail for so many years, India never opened its mouth. And why did we not open our mouth? Because 70% of our lentils are grown by Burma. So had we opened our mouths, the lentils would have stopped.
Oh, that'll be disastrous.
It would have killed us. Yeah. So we kept quiet. So the world runs on food. Our international treaties are on food. Ultimately we're going to realize that Ukraine being attacked means 30% less wheat in the world. It's not just less high tech. So if the world is running on food and you've chosen to make it the most expensive way to get food across to people in the most disastrous way, that's where we should be looking at. All your international treaties should be around food. All government economic planning should be around compassion. Because if you have compassionate food, the world is saved. You'll have cheap food, you'll have less people hungry, you'll have more forests, you'll have great weather, you'll have more democracies, less fighting. Everything will fall into place. If you do not create pain, you will not get pain. That is the universe's immutable
It's so simple,
order.
Isn't it?
It's so simple. It's so strange that nobody gets it.
It's yeah, indeed. Cruelty begets cruelty and worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. We don't relate misery to its roots.
Right.
But the roots of all misery will actually come into the food you eat. If your systems of delivering food to your stomach are so depraved, there is no happiness.
It's well put. This is a huge problem, right? There's policy issues involved. There's a need for policy.
The first thing is to understand that meat does not make you money. It does not make anybody rich.
Well, it makes Kargil rich, or it makes
a few people in Kargil
right,
rich,
right,
but it makes everybody around them poor.
right.
And the riches that they have, they usually spend on medicine or in getting away from it.
Right. So, what do you spend your day doing? Like, what does a typical day of yours look like? I mean, how do you?
I get up early, and I walk, and then I do a little bit of yoga, and then I settle down to work. In what is my work? I work on different levels. At one point, I have my constituency work, which is really people phoning up and saying, the police are being mean to me, or I didn't get this piece of land, or my land's been stolen by other people. 90% of all problems are about land in this country. So I deal with those when they come. But I get over 400 to 500 emails a day of people who are being harassed because they're animal people. And each one of those cases I take up, and we manage to solve 70% of them. So that takes me a lot of time. And it's a very heartbreaking thing to do because so much violence, so much suffering. To come back to COVID.
On that, just to press a little bit, because I know that I've observed that when several times that we've been talking, you get these phone calls and someone's talking about something like that, and you pick it up and you actually
deal with it.
Deal with it, yeah. Are you doing this single-handedly, or have you managed to find people?
No, I have a small team of 4 or 5 people.
But are they able to, I guess they're not able to exert the same kind of authority that you do.
Well, they start with the first level authority.
Yeah.
If it's police, then I deal with it. If it's administration, I deal with it. And which most of it is. But if it's, for instance, the society of a gated community, just being mean to people who have animals, or being mean to the community animals that live there, what we call indies or stray animals, then I step in, or they step in, whichever, but we manage to get everybody scared enough. And we also work like ducks, to get cases won in court. So we've been very successful getting laws put for what citizens can do and can't do. There's a lot of beating of dog feeders. There's COVID especially was the most violent time in India. I don't know about the rest of the world, but it was supposed to be a happy time. You stayed in your house, you watched the sunset, the stars came out, you heard the koel, and the rain pattered happily outside your window. You learned how to make pizzas. You liked your wife. Your children came and sat in your lap. This was supposed to be...
No, it was. I hate to say this, but it was actually quite pleasant, all around for me. Yes.
Yes, but all the people who lived in buildings.
Yes.
And there was the largest amount of violence that India has ever seen. Wife beating, children beating, neighbor beating, animal beating, animal feeder beating. The police received the maximum number of complaints from people who were being subjected to animal violence. I mean, somebody came and beat them up because they were feeding animals.
Right.
On one hand, we had the most amazing thing happening. As soon as there was a lockdown, people weren't allowed to come out. I gave my phone number all over India and said, anybody who has a problem with coming out, let me know. And so I got passes for lakhs of people by talking to DMs, talking to SPs, making lists, sending them out. And I was alone in my house. I didn't even have a secretary. Just phone numbers. And that's what I did the whole of COVID. So people who didn't have enough money to live, people who'd lost their jobs, people who didn't know whether there would be a tomorrow, they came out and fed the animals on the street. India is one of the few countries in the world that still has animals on the street. And that's wonderful. But those animals are dependent on hotel waste, on small shop waste, on the goodness of the person who sells vegetables on the street, etc. And those disappeared. So they actually had to have people coming out to feed them. And so, and especially young people, 15-year-olds, 20-year-olds. But then on the other hand, you had a whole body of people who came out to beat these people up. So that's when I stepped in as well. And that goes on. So now it's become a habit of people in India to call me for everything whenever there is a problem like that.
So People for Animals, PFA, is one of the largest, animal welfare organizations, maybe the largest on the planet.
It is, yes.
I mean, how's it going? Like, are you expanding? Are you trying to spread?
We expand by the day. expand by the day, more and more members come in. We get on average about 40 members a day. We could do much more when it comes to social media. We lack training. We need to train our own people more. But I'm so busy training the police and training judges and training bureaucrats. But we need to make more systems. I need to have more leaders. I need to have a succession plan.
What would it take to make this really hum and successful in America or Western Europe? We talked about the Amazon rainforest, which gets depleted to feed, for meat to North America. So, I just, can't help but feel that the facts have been out there for a long time, but a lot of people aren't aware of them. They just aren't aware of them.
They don't want to know.
Well, I think there are a lot of people who don't want to know, but there are, I guess, a lot of people who wouldn't mind knowing about this, and it just is a lack of awareness.
So it should go into schools. Now, the high courts and the Supreme Courts have ruled so many times that environment and animal welfare should be taught in schools. Mm-hmm. It's just that nobody's made a textbook of it. I have to say, my textbook is being written now. So I will do it before I die. How to get it into schools is another matter. I'll then have to lobby with the government.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. With some of my other guests, I've talked about what are the kinds of things that people should learn in school. Very different. Bayesian thinking and probability and things like that as tools. But this seems, an equally important.
Not equally,
thing.
Probably the most important.
Probably even
because
more
you
important.
save the planet.
Indeed.
Otherwise, there's no planet. Then you can do all your algorithms later and learn coding. But if there's no planet, then there's no coding.
I get a sense you're being facetious.
No, I'm absolutely serious.
So I'm assuming that you're optimistic about this, right?
No, not at all.
You're not?
Optimism doesn't form any part of my nature.
So then are you being quixotic about this?
No, I just do what I have to do.
Yeah.
And this is my path. But what I want to do is, I have a booklet which I gave you of the 170 things I want to do before I die. And those are the things that are my path. And I believe, for instance, if I could stop meat export, I would change India. I don't want to change the planet. India is one of the worst culprits on the planet. If I can change India, I can change the world. If we can stop the things we do, and we've been leaders in so many things. We're the first people, for instance, to stop dissection. When I was minister 3 years ago, we were the first government, because I asked my colleague in the government to pay money to an institute, a government institute for cellular microbiology in Hyderabad to make clean meat. We were the first country to stop bullfighting. We've been the first. In fact, we were the first country to stop smoking in planes.
Really?
Yeah, I did that the first day I became minister when I was 32.
Wow, I didn't know that.
It was done on my first day. I just put a ban on it.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, because that's been so annoying, So, yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, I just couldn't breathe in planes. So it was always on my mind.
Right, and you've also, I guess, introduced that a red or a green mark
Red, green
on
dot,
packages.
because most people don't want to read.
Right.
So they're not going to read that 2%, that tiny micro thing which says there's beef in this,
right,
or something,
right.
So what we just did was put red and green dots on it. It's a big fight. And who was the fight? This is the extraordinary part of it. The fight was not against people who had meat in their products. It was against the vegetarian lobby, the industrialists, who actually were putting meat in their products and calling it vegetarian. Like Chyawanprash.
Right.
They were the biggest lobbyists against it. Now we are in court because I want to put it, the same red and green dot, into household products, shampoos, soaps, because most of them have meat. So the entire industry has combined against me and gone to court and got a stay, which is now 7 years. And saying that this is unfair and it will make them reveal and it's bad for their business. If it's bad for your business, take it out. Even a meat eater does not want to wash his hair with meat. He just wants to shove it into the hole in his mouth. He doesn't want to put it on his head. You do not want to slather meat all over your body. But 90% of our soaps have meat in them. Your toothpastes have. Everything that has meat in it is now part of the beauty industry. And they didn't want us to know. So they all got together and went as a federation to stop this. So we're fighting. But it now depends on the judge. If the judge can't have one hearing in 7 years, you can imagine what kind of judge he is and why he is doing what he is doing.
Maneka, I usually try and end these on an optimistic note, which is why I asked. I just assumed you were optimistic about this. Because,
no, not at all. I will be optimistic. Come back to me when the first country, starts selling clean meat. That's when I know that we're turning the corner. Now Singapore is selling clean meat. God bless them, but they're selling it as amusement again. But once we get to a point where government says, all right, we will not grow animals. We will have just clean meat. And now we will teach you how to make it. And opens up institutes to teach people. After all, it'll destroy the meat industry because it makes it democratic for anybody.
It's sort of ironic that technology has led to, animal farming, maximizing conversion ratio. And it's sort of ironic that it might actually provide the solution to this.
It has to provide the solution,
yeah.
But it should happen during my lifetime. Otherwise, I'll have to come back again. So that's what I see as the single main answer.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we do a slew of small things. We do the trainings, we go to court. I'm 70 cases in court. We try and repair the system with little band-aids all over. So it's little band-aids. Sometimes they hold up, sometimes they don't hold up. But we get happy with each band-aid. We know they're band-aids.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Did I tell you that a couple of years ago I got the Peter Singer Award?
Oh, I didn't know that. Congratulations. Yeah. That's a huge deal. Well, Maneka, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for spending the time and your expertise and knowledge with the rest of the world. So thanks so much. And we have people tuning in from everywhere, and I hope it has some impact in the Western world as well, which are the biggest consumers of meat.
Well, even if it has no impact, it was fun.